influence on the thought process. It motivates our thoughts, our attitudes, and our emotions. Then, if the defilement gains still more power, if it reaches a point where we can no longer control it, then it reaches the third level, where it spills out in the form of some unwholesome action, some unwholesome deed of body or speech. This third level is called the stage of transgression, vitikama. To give an example, we might be walking down the street, very calm and very happy. There's no trace at all of anger in our mind. Then suddenly we might meet somebody who displeases us, so we had some past quarrels with. When we see him, just when we get the impression of his face and body, then there might arise some impression of anger. And so the defilement of anger now comes to the surface. We become angry. As we get closer to him, we can no longer control our mind. So we burst out in some angry outburst. We speak to him in a nasty and offensive way. In this occurrence, we could see all three levels of the defilements at work. When we're walking down the street, very calm and happy, there's no anger at all present in the mind. But anger is still dormant in the consciousness as an anusaya, a latent tendency. When we get the impression of that antagonistic person, and then when we become angry in mind, then the latent tendency has risen up to the surface. Anger has reached the level of manifestation. Then when we can no longer control the anger and we break out in harsh speech, then the anger is moved from the level of manifestation to the level of transgression. It's motivated and unwholesome verbal deed. Now the 3 steps of the Buddhist path are designed to counteract the defilements of these 3 different levels. The first step, sila, moral discipline, prevents the defilements from reaching the stage of transgression. When we take the precepts, we put a check on our actions of body and speech to ensure that they don't fall into the grip of the defilements, so they don't become a means of expressing greed, hatred, delusion, or their offshoots. But even when we're following the precepts carefully, the mind can still be overrun by the defilements occurring in a purely mental form, operating at the stage of manifestation, governing our thoughts, our emotions, and attitudes. To overcome the defilements at this level, we have to develop concentration, samadhi. When the mind becomes focused and concentrated in a wholesome way, then the active form of the defilements is checked. The defilements subside from the surface of the mind, pushed out by the force of the pure concentration. However, even though the defilements do not appear, still they will remain below at the level of latency, as potentialities able to spring up again in the future if they meet suitable conditions. Therefore, the work of concentration is not enough. It's not sufficient. What is necessary is to eliminate the defilements entirely, right down to the roots, right down to the level of latency. This is the work of wisdom, panya, developed by the practice of insight meditation. When insight is developed, when it reaches its highest point, then it issues in the wisdom of enlightenment. And this wisdom of enlightenment cuts off the defilements right at their source, at the bottom of the mind. Thus, the difference between serenity meditation and insight meditation can be understood in terms of the way they purify the mind. Serenity meditation purifies the mind from the defilements in their active form. It removes them from the level of manifestation. And it does this by suppressing the defilements. And here we have to say that the word suppression in Pali Vikambana shouldn't be confused with repression. Repression is an unconscious mechanism by which the thoughts and emotions are pushed out of awareness, usually with fear and aversion, and they still continue to operate below the surface in subliminal forms. But suppression is a conscious process, a process by which we mindfully still the activity of the unwholesome states. We deliberately remove them from the surface with full awareness of what is taking place. And so in serenity meditation, we suppress the defilements, we remove them from the surface of the consciousness. But in contrast, insight meditation aims at purifying the mind by removing the latent tendencies. And it does this by cutting them off at the level of the root by means of wisdom. Also, there's a difference between the types of defilements with which the two kinds of meditation are principally concerned. Serenity meditation is concerned principally with removing the coarser defilements, such as greed, hatred, and certain of the coarser deluded states. In contrast, insight meditation is directed principally to the subtlest defilement, that is, to ignorance. It's intended to remove even the subtlest and finest rootlets of ignorance. Now, there are two basic approaches to the systematic development of meditation. In both of these, the essential place belongs to the practice of insight meditation. The two approaches differ in the way they utilize concentration as the basis for insight. One approach is called the vehicle of serenity.